Sweetly spiced, tangy, fragrant, and beautiful. This Fesenjoon pomegranate walnut stew is made with tender jackfruit, served on spiced barley, and it costs us less than $3 a serving. I'm Catherine, and I am really looking forward to making this recipe for you today because this pomegranate walnut stew is just so festive looking. It's perfect for pomegranate season, but it also has a lightness to it which makes it a great summer meal. Fesenjoon is an Iranian stew traditionally made with wild duck, but now poultry, and it always contains ground walnuts and pomegranate molasses. The flavor is sweet with a bit of tang from the molasses, and it is just so beautiful. So today I am going to get that flavor of the pomegranate molasses by making the molasses from scratch by reducing pomegranate juice. And I'm going to swap the poultry for shredded young green jackfruit, which is not only incredibly cost effective. This can that we're going to use today costs us $1.99, but the jackfruit stays tender, it's moist, and it gives the stew the look and texture of stewed meat. Fesenjoon is traditionally served on rice, but I love using barley for an even more festive look. I've gone ahead and cooked 1 cup of pearled barley with 1 star anise pod and 1 clove to boost those festive flavors. This is such a great way to get a bit more flavor into a grain while it cooks. You can add a cinnamon stick or cardamom pods or even a fresh herb like thyme, which is what we add when we make our pear barley salad. And in 25 minutes, your spiced barley is ready. For the pomegranate molasses, I do suggest avoiding much multitasking, especially if it's your first time making this. The process is quite simple, but you do need to keep an eye on the progress, and in the last 10 minutes, it can turn from molasses to as hard as a rock quite quickly. So I'll walk you through it, and fingers crossed. I'm combining 1/4 cup of pomegranate juice, half a tablespoon lemon juice, and just a 1/4 teaspoon cane sugar in a small pot. Allow it to come to a low boil and then reduce the heat to a gentle simmer. You want the juice to be bubbling gently. If the surface is completely still, then raise your heat a bit, but if it is bubbling too much, then lower your heat. This process will take about 30 minutes, but in the last 10 minutes, you want to really keep an eye on it. The bubbles will start looking thicker, and once it has reduced to a 1/4 cup, your molasses is done. If the bubbles have thickened, the color has darkened, and you start smelling it becoming more pronounced, take it off the heat right away. If you're not sure if it's quite done, you can pour it into a glass measuring cup, and if it measures a 1/4 cup, then you're good to go. But if it's still closer to half a cup, then you're safe to pour it back in and let it reduce a little while longer. Another way to check if your molasses is done is that if you dip a spoon in and it coats the back of the spoon instead of dripping off like it still is now, then that's another sign that you're good to go. Because this molasses can turn quite quickly, I prefer to err on undercooking it by a minute than overcooking it by a minute, because if it gets overcooked, then it gets really sticky and difficult to use. So I also like to pour it into a glass measuring cup to cool down while I prepare the rest of the dish. That way it doesn't stay in the hot pot. We love the taste of this fresh molasses, but if you can find bottled pomegranate molasses, it will save you this 30 to 35 minutes of prep time. We have found 2 different brands. One is priced at $3.99. We gave that one a try, and the dish was a little bit sweeter, a little more vinegary, and the color was a little lighter, but it did work quite well. The other bottle was priced at $18.99. It's all organic with no added sugars. So the price of this dish can change depending on what kind of molasses you use, and the taste and the color might also change. So shop around, try this method from scratch, and see what works best for you. This looks great. It's a tiny bit thinner than is ideal. I prefer it to be a little bit thicker, but like I said, I'm going to play it safe, so this is pretty good. Now let's make the stew. I've toasted 1 cup of walnuts in the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 6 to 8 minutes until golden and fragrant. You can also toast them in a pan if you'd like, and then set them aside to cool. Dice 1 yellow onion and cook it over medium-low heat for at least 5 minutes to get some nice caramelization started. You can cook it in a dash of oil or use water or broth. During this time, I like to shred the pieces of jackfruit by hand. If you can't find canned young green jackfruit, you can try this recipe with chickpeas or lentils, or even a mixture of sturdier vegetables. Add the jackfruit to the onions, stir for about 1 minute, then pour in 1.5 cups of vegetable broth or water. We love using our homemade veggie broth for extra flavor and savings. Bring to a boil, reduce to a simmer, and cover with a lid for 15 minutes. Many traditional recipes actually simmer the ground walnuts in water or broth for 30 minutes to an hour or more. So this is where I deviate from a traditional preparation. And while the jackfruit simmers, I grind my cooled walnuts into a course meal in a food processor, and after 15 minutes, I add in the walnuts, the pomegranate molasses, and some great spices. With the jackfruit nice and tender, pour in those crushed walnuts, the pomegranate molasses, and half a teaspoon turmeric, half a teaspoon cinnamon, and a pinch of nutmeg. You can use a bit of fresh ground saffron if you have it, and traditionally, dried golden plums are added. Since I don't usually have those on hand, I tend to add a bit of orange zest and a splash of orange juice if I have it. Now cook this for another 5 minutes to let all the flavors come together. If fresh pomegranates are in season, you can open up one of these beautiful fruits for the seeds. I have tried a number of ways of doing this, and this one is my favorite, but I do suggest wearing an apron to protect your clothes. And if you're wearing a nice dress, you might just want to take it off and do some topless pomegranate de-seeding. I won't do that now, but actually. Cut around the stem of the pomegranate with the tip of your knife on a slight angle. You want to go deep enough down, but not so deep that you pierce the precious seeds. Take that out and make about 4 shallow cuts through the skin on each of these edges. Again, you want the cuts to be deep enough that you can pull the pomegranate open, but not so deep that you're cutting through all the seeds. Now pull it open, and with the back of a spoon, tap all these seeds out. You will see that large parts of the membrane fall out, and you can easily remove those pieces. There is a method using water, but I prefer this one. This does spray a bit, so be careful, and if the seeds are a little stubborn, you can help break the membrane and guide the seeds out with your hands. I think it's time to plate up this beautiful jackfruit Fesenjoon. Is just so pretty. It's fragrant, it's flavorful, it's comforting, but it's also light and fresh because of the fruity notes. And this recipe serves for and costs us just over $8 using pomegranate juice purchased from our wholesale store, and closer to $11 using juice purchased from our local grocery store. If you purchase a fresh pomegranate and the parsley to garnish on top, depending on the time of year, it could add an extra $4 or more. So some ways to save with this dish are using the jackfruit instead of chicken, and you can use frozen pomegranate arils instead of fresh, or you could top this with a dried fruit or some more toasted walnuts. I really hope you click that link below and make yourself this recipe, and subscribe for a new video every Sunday at 5. And next Sunday, I'm going back to my own roots and making my favorite Portuguese sweet muffins. And now it's time to eat.